welcome to our podcast, Dr. Diaries Adventures to Ireland. I'm your host, Graham. The aim of this podcast is to showcase doctors' relocation journeys to Ireland. So whether you're a doctor interested in the move or just curious about life in Ireland, this is the podcast for you. Now, let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's Dr. Diaries. Today we're joined by Andri. Andri, tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks for having me, Graham. So my name is Andri Engelbrecht. I am a consultant in emergency medicine, currently working in Tipperary University Hospital. I have been in Ireland now for a little over 6 years, and it's all thanks to you guys at MatchMedics that's given me this opportunity both to be in Ireland and to be here with you today.
Yeah. And Andri, you and I have been on quite the journey together from the very initial. I was recalling this the other day, the initial reach out on LinkedIn, however many years ago. Take us back there if you can remember that.
So that was back in 2017. I was working as a consultant in private in Cape Town, and I remember you inviting me on LinkedIn, me being very skeptical of, potential scam. And I remember you phoned me a few times, and the one day I was standing outside the unit that I was working in, having this conversation about potentially moving to Ireland. And after I put down the phone with you, I phoned my husband and I said, look, are we going to do this? And he said, let's go for it. And that's kind of the last and only formal conversation that we had about moving to Ireland. 3 months later, we had sold our cars, sold our house, and we were moving. So it all happened very quickly.
You guys jumped straight into it, didn't you? And I can recall I was preparing myself to go to the South African Emergency Medicine Conference in Centurion City at the time, and you were one of the lucky few I thought I'd connect with to see can we link up there. And what a journey you've been on since then. So take us through your first step in Ireland and how it's brought you to being now an emergency medicine consultant in Tipperary.
So we moved over in February of 2018, and I started as a registrar in emergency medicine in Portlaoise Hospital. I spent nearly just short of a year in Portlaoise when I decided to move to Connolly Hospital, Blanchardstown.
And you're still famous there, Andri, by the way, in Portlaoise. The consultants there for all the right reasons. They sing your praises every time. Find me more Andris, please. Where are the Andris gone? So you're very famous for all the right reasons down in that part of the country.
Well, I'm eternally grateful to them because they gave me a very good introduction to Ireland, and they were very kind to me when I just arrived, kind of giving me the space to kind of just find my feet and get used to the Irish healthcare system. And like I say, I will be eternally grateful to them for that opportunity. But once I had made a decision to leave, I moved on to Connolly Hospital in Blanchardstown, where I spent about 18 months, of which I worked as a registrar initially. And then with the help of the consultants in Connolly, I was able to then complete my specialist registration, after which I started working as a consultant in July of 2019. So it was a little over a year that I had worked as a registrar before going back to working as a consultant.
Okay, and then jump into the spot of consultant, and little do we know, months later, the world was in complete lockdown, and there is you in that brand new job as one of the consultants there in Connolly. Talk us through that time.
So that was very tough because I was actually one of the clinical leads for the department at that time, and it was very difficult to really know what to expect coming into this. We had the reports coming from the rest of Europe with nearly 700 people dying a day in Italy, and we were really expecting the worst. And in true South African fashion, I did prepare for the worst. I remember bringing in ventilators from external sources and thinking how we were going to rejig the department to cope with the demand. But thankfully, as bad as it was, we never kind of saw it to such an extreme degree as some of our colleagues abroad and Europe.
Yeah. What a crazy time, and I know you're also steering a lot of the recruitment of junior doctors too during that time too. Can you even imagine moving to a brand new country, starting a brand new job during that time too? Is wild now thinking back to those days. So talk us through then. Before we jump on to Tipperary, I'd love for you to share that really interesting case with us that you had that brought you back to your SAFA days. Tell us about this interesting patient you had in Con.
Well, it's probably my claim to fame in Ireland. I
Yeah.
had the opportunity to treat what is known as the first and potentially only potential fatal snake bite on record in Ireland, and it happened just before the pandemic struck. So it was, and just before St. Patrick's Day 2020, it was maybe a week
Yeah.
or so before.
St. Patrick will be turning in his grave to hear there's snakes
Totally.
back in Ireland.
And when the kind of red emergency phone rang, and it was kind of on a Friday afternoon, I was just about to go home. And when the guy said they had a snake bite, I still gave a big laugh and say, "Ha ha, St. Patrick's Day is coming up. That's very funny." And they said, "No, they really do." And I said, "What's the story?" And as luck would have it, the fellow was keeping a South African snake called a puff adder. And believe
Okay.
it or not, there's a community of enthusiasts that keep all kinds of reptiles, very poorly regulated, kind of from a governance point of view. And the fella came in with a puff at a bite to the hand. At that
Okay.
point, he already had signs and symptoms of severe envenomation, and we had to scramble to get the antivenom brought down from Belfast. So we were very lucky because typically the antivenom is only kept on mainland UK in Manchester
Okay.
Zoo, but they did have stock in Belfast, and it was then brought down by courier
Yeah.
to Dublin.
Wow, yeah, what very special cargo that was coming down the M1 from Belfast straight to Connolly Hospital. And what a claim to fame to have too, Andrea. I'm sure you'd like to keep that in your past too, and not have further snake bite visits in time to come here in Ireland.
Please not, please not.
So then that time ended then in Connolly, and you jumped across to Tipperary now, where you very firmly call it home. There with your husband, and we're miniature animal farm. Dare I say?
Before just joining TIP, I had a brief stint in Vincent's, and that's kind of where things changed. It was coming towards the end of the first wave of COVID in 2021, early 21. And we kind of, at that time, I think everybody was reassessing their life and their life choices and their kind
Sure.
of their position in life. And we decided that Dublin living, especially with the 5 kilometer restrictions at that time, wasn't for us. So we started looking kind of wider, and that's when we found this old farmhouse in Tipperary that we
Yeah.
fell in love with. And I had the opportunity to join the team in Clonmel, which has absolutely been fabulous. And the change of kind of lifestyle and pace has been absolutely fabulous.
And you find that sacred space of work-life balance as a consultant. Tell us about
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that I could finally kind of take some control over my work hours and way of working, and potentially free up some time in my work week by structuring my hours in such a way that I could get back to things that I love, or things that discover new things that I didn't even know I would
Yeah.
enjoy. And that's been absolutely life changing, absolutely life changing.
And tell us about that little miniature
So
farm that's growing legs by the week, by the looks of it.
so we've got a bit of land surrounding the old farmhouse, and we've been kind of rapidly accumulating animals. So we've got a few miniature horses. I've got some alpacas, which is,
Oh,
very unusual. And we've got a bit of poultry as well. I'm currently raising two 5-week-old goslings. That was a
wow.
surprise, surprise hatch that I didn't know would happen. So there's always something, going on.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like never a dull moment down in Clonmel.
No.
No. Amazing. Okay, and I guess moving on from that, then you had recent news there a week or so back that you are on the pathway to that coveted Irish passport, and congrats. I know
Thank you very much.
it's a long old journey for a lot of people, but I know having being in your guys' circle for quite a while, that was one of your ultimate aims, wasn't it? To really put down proper roots here and become Irish.
Yeah, I think it's an absolute privilege to be considered as an Irish citizen. I think that um, very quickly on in our move here that we realized that we probably wouldn't go back to South Africa anytime soon. To come now to this point where I actually consider Ireland home. South Africa will
Yeah,
always be, my mother country and my current country of birth. But I now consider Ireland home, which is a big leap from where we started off. But it's an
absolutely.
absolute privilege to be able to have two countries to call home.
Amazing, yeah, and congrats again, there's so much more that comes with that too, in terms of freedom to travel wherever, and that highly coveted Irish passport is sought after across the world. Without tooting our own horns, Andri, but it
No,
does make travel a heck of a lot easier, doesn't it? But we might jump into a couple of quick fire questions now, if that's all right with you,
no problem.
and test your love of Ireland. Tell me, aside from that fastly growing miniature farm in your back garden, where's your favourite place in Ireland?
I have to say it has to be County Donegal. I think
Okay.
as another kind of a rural part of Ireland, from a geographical and scenery point of view, but just also the way of life up there, it's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, and also another miniature South Africa in parts of that northwestern part of the country. You guys are taking over for all the right reasons, which is amazing. We love it. Aside from when we get to days of rugby, which we won't get into because there's a big rivalry coming up this weekend. So we don't want to get into that just yet. Next one, favorite Irish celebrity.
It has to be Saoirse Ronan. I think, apart from the fact that the name is difficult to pronounce, she's a brilliant
Yeah.
actress, and I think she waves the Irish flag very proudly, and so rightly so.
Yeah, okay, well, let's delve further into that. Favorite Saoirse Ronan movie?
I think it had to be Little Women. Uh,
Yeah,
it kind of it's such a unique take on an old classic, and she brings so much to it. And I think it just shows, apart from the more modern stuff that she's done, kind of the breadth of her acting capabilities.
amazing. Yeah, she really does, and she makes it very difficult for anyone outside of Ireland to pronounce her name. But she also makes it very difficult for people to forget her because she
Exactly.
has so many outstanding performances in the work that she does. Next one, favorite Irish slang or phrase that maybe at first you thought was, what's going on here?
It has to be plumos. To plumos
Okay,
somebody. I think it's such
yeah,
a descriptive word of what you're actually doing. I
yeah.
absolutely
And has someone plumossed you since you discovered the word?
Well, I think the original plumosser would have been you, Graham, that plumossed me into coming to Ireland.
I don't know whether or not if I'm insulted or honoured of that one, Andrew, but I'll take it. I'll take it either way. And as you said there, rightly so, you've got two homes now, but there's always that home comfort from SA. What is that home comfort for you that when you see it or breathe it or eat it,
Mm.
reminds you of home?
I don't know if you're familiar with amarula. but it's a
Yes.
cream liqueur similar to Bailey's, but it's made with the amarula fruit. That's very unique, kind of African and South African. And I think that even though I'm a big Bailey's fan, whenever I can get my hands on a bottle of amarula, that kind of just brings back that home memory, kind of, the African sun and the fruit kind of ripening in that environment.
I
Uh,
had the privilege of tasting it recently. A very kind doctor gave it to me as a gift. Someone who I recently brought across from Joburg and said, "You're going to want to taste this," and he was right. So I've been lucky to taste your version, better version, dare I say, of Bailey's. Great, and I guess for anyone who's listening or watching this in time, if you were to give one piece of advice to them in terms of relocating to Ireland as a doctor, what would that be?
I think that I've been very fortunate in my career path that things kind of worked out and worked out in a timely fashion. I have, however, seen a lot of junior doctors coming into the country that find means of specialization very difficult. So we all know the challenges around getting into opportunities to specialize, especially for those that are non-EU citizens. And although that is changing,
Yeah,
and hopefully rapidly so, it is still very challenging. And these doctors kind of do get stuck in chronic career positions that where they do become very disillusioned and demotivated. And if doctors are considering moving across, they need to be aware of that. They need to perhaps appreciate the time that it will take potentially to get into a position to specialize. Although the alternative pathway is becoming more popular, and I know of several doctors that have been successful in completing, the alternative pathway and getting onto the specialist register. I would still perhaps encourage doctors to, if you don't have the time because you're a little bit older or you're in, but under pressure to get stuff sorted, perhaps consider specializing in South Africa before coming across, because the amount of time that you will be investing here in specializing will be considerable, and you will have to have the kind of grit and the stamina to kind of see that through.
I think that's a very valid point and something we certainly don't shy away from in the MatchMedics team when we're talking about the move to Ireland to other South Africans or any other nationality moving across. It is a hard slog. It is a long old journey. You mentioned you know, for someone to consider the possibility of specializing in South Africa, that is, increasingly becoming even more difficult for a lot of South Africans, which again is another enticing, let's say, pull factor to Ireland. That if those opportunities are drying up here for me, there are other reasons why I'm looking to move to Ireland, and let's explore them first on that journey.
And I do think that with the opportunity, or with the demand for the alternative pathway, the Irish government will have to acknowledge the need to increase their numbers of specialist trainees, to open up the trainee programs for citizens from other countries, because there are doctors that are creating their own specialist training opportunities through the alternative pathway, and they will have to acknowledge that, and they will have to at some point step up to meet that demand in their own benefit. I mean, for a
Absolutely.
country, where there's a deficit of more than 900 consultants, it would surely be in their benefit to expand the programs and increase the training capacity.
Preaching to the choir here, Andri. I'm fully on board with that, really. And you're right to point out there are some changes, but there needs to be more. Absolutely. Like many other Western societies, the Irish health system, both public and private, is heavily indebted to international medical graduates. And change is coming. Change has happened, and more change is certainly due. But doctors need to see those opportunities, of course, become available to them, and not just Irish or European qualified doctors. So a very valid point to share there when it comes to advice on moving across. But as we both agreed, people have their own reasons. And that's why I love that personal journey. Everyone has their own individual reasons as to why they're looking to move. And hopefully Ireland will tick as many of those boxes as possible. Before we wrap up, I'd love to ask you this question. That is, what's been the best part about being here in Ireland and your whole journey here to Ireland?
I think, again, the absolute privilege that Ireland affords us to live a life that we would have never been able to live back home. And you were talking about the travel opportunities with the Irish passport, but it's, for me, it's so much more. In the citizenship ceremony, they talked about the protection that is afforded to you as an Irish citizen, and kind of the safety and the quality of life that we have here, and that is something that unfortunately at home has been jeopardized. And if I think specifically living kind of on a farm setting that we currently do here, I would not have been able to do that back home, as sad as that is. So that for me, every day that I'm kind of out here living this life, I realize that it's an absolute privilege, because I wouldn't have had that any other way.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being so honest with me there, and for everyone listening too. There's a lot of things that me as an Irish person, born and bred here, I believe we do definitely take for granted. And when speaking to people like yourself, Andri, hearing your story and hearing the comparisons between the two totally different worlds, there's a lot we need to be grateful for here, I think, in Ireland, and I see the privileges that we're afforded being in this part of the world. So thanks so much for sharing there. So I think that's us. Anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
No, thanks, Graham. I'm again just grateful that you did invite me on LinkedIn, because I don't know if you realize, but you did forever change the trajectory of my life. And, like I've said, I will be eternally grateful for that.
An honor I don't take lightly. Andri, thanks again so much for joining us on Dr. Diaries today, and we'll talk very soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you like what you heard today, please follow wherever you get your podcasts. Want to kickstart your relocation journey? Reach out to the team on our socials at MatchMedics.